Welcome to the lecture this week, and this week we're having a look at coral reefs, oceans and marine life. So we're going to start having a look at coral reefs and the health of all of our oceans and seas on the planet. We're going to have a look in particular about what's happening in Australia and what is perhaps a threat to some of our, not only the coral reefs but also our underwater life. And then what kinds of things everybody can do in small ways and large ways to actually ensure that our oceans continue to be a healthy place full of a whole range of fish, and that our coral reefs will be protected going forward into the future. So we hope you enjoy.
So what is coral? Coral is a living organism. It has a limestone skeleton. We have bones inside of our bodies. They have limestone inside of theirs. They are polyps or small creatures, as you can see here. Look, here they go. Aren't they pretty? The polyps are a creature that attach to old coral. They take in food and create the limestone skeleton, which is what we know as coral. They grow together and produce these large structures under the ocean, thereby creating coral reefs. Coral reefs are rich and diverse. They're home to 1 in 4 ocean species. That's not 1 in 4 animals in the ocean, but 1 in 4 types of animals in the ocean. Some 1 million species of animals live in coral reefs. The sad thing is, though, we haven't identified all of the animals. Most of them we don't even know what they are before they die. And they die because they die out. All animals of a species might die out because of human influences or natural influences. But yes, we do know a lot of species, and there are still many more species of animals that live in reefs to be discovered and identified. Coral reefs only make up 0.1% of the Earth's surface, but as you can imagine, if 1 in 4 ocean species lives at coral reefs, they are very busy places to live. They're like underground cities, crowded with many species of life. We say they are storehouses of biological diversity. Bio means life, so diversity, different types. There we have it, storehouses of biological diversity. They are places that we know we can go to find lots of different types of animal and plant life. Very impressive things they are. Now I'm going to show you a video which is an explanation of what coral actually is.
Thank you, AJ. And yes, we're going to get you to step away from this podcast for just a few minutes and have a look at a scientific explanation of exactly how coral forms. Remember to return back to this podcast after watching this very short YouTube clip. So we're going to have a look at some of our reef dwellers, in other words, some of our fish that live on our great coral reefs. And the first one is a firefish, obviously named because of that beautiful tail that is really a beautiful fiery red. And they're characterised, all firefish, by their very bright colours. They've also got this very unusually long dorsal fin, and it's used to actually communicate with other fish, which is unusual for fish. They don't normally communicate. And it can also be used to wedge itself into the coral if it wants to protect itself from any other predators. The second one we have is a lovely bright clown triggerfish, and it's without doubt one of the most beautiful and unusual fish of the trigger family. Its bright yellow mouth, they believe, deters any predators from wanting to eat it. But even though this mouth is very small, it's very strong. They live by eating mainly crustaceans, and that jaw that they have can crack open crustaceans that live at the bottom of the ocean. The third one we have here is a falco hulkfish, and it has a peculiar habit of actually resting on the coral. For a fish, it's actually not a really good swimmer, and as it moves, it's really quite awkward in the water, which is, as I said, very unusual for a fish. And the last one is a tomato clownfish, and it's characterised by that long stripe that you can see going down the side of its head. It also has a dark patch at the end of its body. They are a very quick, darty little fish, and they dart in and out of the coral very quickly. They're only found in the waters of the Pacific and the Indo-Pacific. And just 3 more of our most famous coral fishes. The next one is an orange-green triggerfish, and it's one of the most aggressive of the trigger types of fish in the ocean. They again have very strong jaws, and they can crack open stony coral and grind them up into piles of sand. They have very, very long tails as well. And the next one is our beautiful queen angelfish. And it's one of the nicest of the angelfish. They have these incredible, spectacular blue and yellow markings with the rainbow edges right out at the edges of their fins. And the last one is our regal tang. And it has this really amazing black and almost neon blue colours. And right at the end of its tail has this bright yellow wedge. All of these fish that I've shown you, all 7 of them, are very popular to have in aquariums. But obviously, too, they're very protected fish on our coral reefs.
Sharks. Why would I talk about sharks in the lecture on the Great Barrier on reefs? Well, they are the apex predators. Apex means top of the triangle. They're the top of the food chain. Nothing in the ocean, well, apart from maybe killer whales, nothing in the ocean poses a threat to a shark, other than us. They've been greatly overfished. We are taking more sharks from the ocean than they are able to replace themselves with, or than they're able to replace naturally. So essentially we are killing more sharks than are being born. This is overfishing. They're being fished legally within structured guidelines, and also illegally, which means that people are taking sharks even though they shouldn't. And this is worse in poor countries. Poorer countries, often around the equator, that usually have the largest shark populations, are those that need sharks for food and for food really. So if countries that are poor are taking more sharks than are required, this is a problem for the Great Barrier, or for reefs in those areas. I keep saying Great Barrier Reef, sorry, for reefs in those areas. And it's a problem because most of the world's reefs are in poorer countries. Poorer countries tend to be around the equator, and that is where you find reefs. So this is a problem as well. People are out of necessity are destroying the reef because they want to survive, and the need for human survival comes before the need for the environment's survival in many people's thinking. So why are we taking so many sharks? Well, in many countries, shark fin soup is a delicacy. Shark fin soup is illegal in New Zealand. It's not illegal in Australia, but it is greatly frowned upon. And even in countries where shark fin soup is sold, more and more people are now saying that it should be banned. It has no health benefits. And people say, oh, it tastes really delicious and I really like shark fin soup and I don't want to stop having shark fin soup. But by eating shark fin soup, you're not getting anything that you can't get from vegetable soup. You're not actually making yourself healthier at all. All you're doing is killing sharks. The shark is killed just for its fins. People catch the shark, slice off its fins, and throw the dying shark back into the ocean. How can you justify doing that to a shark just so you can have something delicious to eat that has no benefits for your body? Do you enjoy shark fin soup? So, sharks and reefs. Well, sharks grow very slowly, and they mature later than other animals, which means they reach adulthood a lot more slowly. And they have slow rates of reproduction. Other animals might be able to reproduce or have babies at a younger age. Sharks grow slowly, have babies later. So yeah, it's if you take a baby shark or a young shark, you are really doing damage to the shark population. If you overfish, we have low rates of reproduction, and that is a huge problem. Taking sharks adds to coral bleaching because sharks are able to consume some of the predatory fish. For example, if you take lots of sharks, they will not eat the big fish, and the big fish will eat more and more of the little fish. So if you're removing the top predator then becomes another type of fish, and so on. You're affecting the food chain. We need to have sharks in reefs to maintain the reef's food chain. So essentially, in short, taking sharks is bad for coral reefs.
Thank you, AJ. We're going to step away from the lecture again for a few minutes and listen to an incredible interview with some people talking about how important it is to have sharks to have a healthy reef. Included in this interview is a nice intercept by Richard Branson. And so there are a range of accents as you listen to these people talk about healthy reefs, healthy sharks. Remember to come back to the lecture after you have finished watching this very short YouTube clip.
Coral bleaching, what is it? Well, bleaching essentially means turning white, and when coral turns white, it's sick. So white coral is unhealthy coral. The coral loses the zooxanthellae. We looked at zooxanthellae a few videos ago. These are the plants that exist in polyps in coral. They photosynthesize the energy from the sun. That's when they turn the energy from the sun into, or the light from the sun into energy that they use to live on. And that is also 90% of the food source of polyps themselves. So if the water gets too warm, the zooxanthellae will leave, or too cold, the zooxanthellae will leave, thereby leaving the polyps without most of its food source and also without its colour, because zooxanthellae give colour to the polyps. As we see here in this image, the polyps are white because they have no zooxanthellae. So this is coral that will probably die. So cute. So let's look at the human threat to reefs. Let's look at what we are doing to reefs. Well, we are destroying them, whether intentionally or unintentionally. We are destroying reefs. We are changing the coastline by chopping down the forests that exist on the coastline, and when we do that, there is nothing to hold the soil in place. The soil then flows off into the ocean, releasing lots of nutrients, and these nutrients are eaten or are a food source for plants such as algae, and algae can choke the water, starving it of oxygen. We take too many fish. We take more fish than the reef can afford to lose, and the reef will suffer. A lot of fish actually maintain the reefs by eating the algae that grow on coral reefs, and the more fish that we take from the food chain, other fish will die. So the more that you fish, the fewer fish there will be, not just because we're taking them from the ocean. There is a flow-on effect. Climate change. We are causing climate change. The climate is always changing, but because of what we are doing, it is changing faster and more irrationally. We burn fossil fuels. That is the organic matter of long decayed animals or dead dinosaurs. We burn petrol in our cars, and that goes into the atmosphere, releasing carbon dioxide. That heats the planet. A heated planet warms the oceans, and warmed oceans leads to coral bleaching, which is not healthy. So,
another threat to our oceans is reef dredging. This craft here is a dredge, and the dredge will sometimes work in a river, but most often in the coastal areas. And the purpose of a dredge is to suck up sand from the bottom of the ocean and move it to a different position. They do this so that it creates a deeper channel of water that ships can sail through. And most of our dredging most recently has been done in an area north of Brisbane called Rockhampton. And Rockhampton is a huge port for ships to come in and to pick up any of the mining that happens in this area, and it's shipped then further north back into Asia. So far, the dredging has not been really looked after carefully by the government. And what has happened is that with all the dredging, coral has been destroyed, the marine life has been affected, and the fishermen have had huge reductions in their catches that come from these sea and marine areas. And now they're lobbying the government, putting pressure on the government for the government to have control over this dredging, not the mining companies. The mining companies obviously only have a lot of money to make, but the government should really be protecting the livelihoods of everybody, the fishermen, the mining companies, the local people, and of course looking after the long-term health of the reef.
So, not good. As we can see, reef dredging causes lots of damage, can pollute the water, can kill fish, and also make people sick. But money talks, and who cares about the environment when you can make some money? Yeah. So carbon dioxide. Well, carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. We burn fossil fuels, as I said before. We use cars. We fly in airplanes. This releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide does occur naturally because forest fires, for example, release carbon dioxide when the trees are burned. We call the things such as forests carbon sinks. The Amazon is perhaps the world's largest carbon sink. Wood traps carbon dioxide. keeps it in the earth, keeps it in the ground. But when trees are burned, that is released into the atmosphere, and this pollutes the air. Now, the level of carbon dioxide is the highest it has been for millions of years, and it is this high precisely because of the actions of our society. When we burn fuel, we burn wood, we burn coal, we are releasing carbon dioxide. There is no doubt about it. And the more carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere, the more that goes into the oceans. The oceans can only take so much carbon dioxide before they start to acidify. Acidification is when the oceans really become like acid. Sting your skin, sting your eyes, and can also harm the shells of living creatures in the oceans. It also prevents coral from building their limestone skeletons, because if the ocean is acidic, it eats away at the limestone. It eats away at the shells of crabs, of prawns. So we do not want to have more carbon dioxide go into the atmosphere, because it will go into the ocean and that will kill life in a whole new way.
Thank you, AJ. And of course, this is a nice, simple picture description of what happens when humans start by burning fossil fuels and releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. This also goes into the water, and when CO2 mixes with salt water, it produces carbonic acid. This acid eats away at the carbonate, which is the main building block for coral building their shells. And so with less protection, the coral becomes less and less healthy and dies. And of course, that is less fish. And then that affects the humans who are relying on fish for a source of food. So we often think about the danger of releasing CO2 and what this is doing to our air, but it is also a huge problem for our sea, for our corals, and for healthy fish life under the water. And of course, this is the flow-on effect. So going underneath the water from where sand has been dredged, the coral begins to die off, and then the fish disappear and the coral completely dies. So the flow-on effect obviously is destruction of the reef. Even though from the surface the water looks lovely and clean, it is destroying underneath the surface.
So that was nice. Now let's look at the Australia's most famous reef, the Great Barrier Reef. It's the largest reef on Earth at 2,100 kilometres long, stretching from just north of Brisbane to the far north of the country. You can see it from space, it's so large. Now, it's been around for countless thousands of years, but not in its same shape and form as we find it today. When the oceans are cooler, it gets smaller. When the oceans are warmer, it gets larger. So it's very sensitive. It's very sensitive to the changes of temperature in the ocean. Now, the Great Barrier Reef is a very strong cultural icon of Australia. When people think of Australia, they think of the Great Barrier Reef, Uluru, koalas, kangaroos, Sydney Opera House. So it's right up there. So it's one of the things that draws people to our country. And it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which means that we are it's protected by the United Nations, along with many other parts of the world. What's interesting is that in 1770, when Captain Cook was navigating the eastern coast of Australia, he got stranded on the reef. He was there for several weeks. The ship didn't sink, thankfully, but it was damaged, so they spent a few weeks repairing the boat. And in order to get off the reef, they were stuck on it. They had to wait for not only high tide, when the water was a bit higher, but also they had to lighten the load. And they did that by throwing things overboard, so the boat would float a bit more. One of the things they threw overboard was a cannon, and that cannon was later retrieved and is now on display at the National Museum of New Zealand in Wellington. You can see where Captain Cook got stranded because coral takes such a long time to grow that it would take hundreds of years for any sort of damage to be undone. So if a boat gets stranded or if you break coral off, that coral will not be seen in the same form again for many hundreds of years, which is why we've got to be very, very careful with coral. Try not to touch it, try not to damage it. I'm going to show you a video.
Now we're going to step away from the lecture for a few moments and look at a really quite beautiful YouTube clip and information, all about the Great Barrier Reef and its environment. The peoples of this area, the largest group are the Torres Strait Islanders. They have for centuries, thousands of years, had a very close connection with the environment in this area. They are the protectors of the environment. Today we're really interested in how they protect the coral reef and its environment, but they're also the protectors of the bird life and the land in this area. Remember to return back to this lecture after watching this YouTube clip about the Great Barrier Reef. Of course, there are hundreds and hundreds of islands that compose the coral reef islands. Not all of them are inhabitable because not all of them have fresh water. But some of the most well-known ones that are visited quite frequently by tourists are the lovely little island of Brampton. We have the Heron Island, which you can see here has the most incredibly pristine white sands. We have Lizard Island, which is visited by small boats and large craft. They go snorkeling around this area. And of course, we have Hayman Island, which is a quite popular honeymoon spot and also a tourist spot that has been developed into a quite upmarket resort for people. So visiting some of these islands, you can drop in just off catamarans and boats to do snorkeling, or you can have a longer stay on islands like Hayman. So we're going to have a look now at our traditional owners of the Great Barrier Reefs. And there are more than 70 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional owner groups who've had for thousands of years a continuing relationship with the Great Barrier Reef and of course its natural resources. They continue to have this relationship today by working very closely with the Great Barrier Reef Maritime Park area and the people who work there. This area goes all the way from along the Queensland coast, from the Torres Strait Islands in the north to Bundaberg in the south. And as we know, the Aboriginal people are the first Australians, and they're recognised as being the oldest civilization in the world. And they were hunter-gatherers. They relied on plants, animals, and the environment for their survival. So this gives them a really great relationship of thousands of years with the land and how to make sure to maintain the land for future generations. Although they did hunt, most of their livelihood came from the ocean. They were a seafaring people, and they were related to the Melanesians of the Southwest Pacific. So a little bit different to some of the other first Aboriginals further south. The food from the sea is still a valuable part of their modern economy, culture and diet. And in fact, they have the largest consumption of seafood per person in the world. So for thousands of years, they did have very, very close connections with the land. They had their own folklore, their customs. They were quite happy sailing large distance, gathering vital resources. They exchanged tools not only with the Aboriginal groups, but probably also with the Papua New Guineans further north and to some of the other island groups. They are very distinct, though, from the other first Australians, the Aboriginal peoples who inhabit the rest of the land. Today, the Torres Island Strait people still have native title rights and interests in the north part of the Great Barrier Reef. And this means that nobody can mine there. You can't approach and go into those waters without getting permission from the Torres Strait Islander people. And they're the only ones who can fish in that area. And the government does try to protect that. It stops other fishing boats that sometimes come in from further north, from Indonesia or some of the other islands. It stops them from coming in and fishing in these areas because they should only be fished by the Torres Strait Islanders. So Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginal, or our first peoples, similar but a little bit different. The Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders have differences in the Torres Strait Islanders have a lot of sea-related customs, And of course, they intermarried more with some of the Polynesian groups and some of the people from Papua New Guinea, from Fiji, Samoa, and it makes them physically different as well as culturally a little bit different. Within the Torres Strait Islanders, there are many subgroups as well, and each group has their own distinctive culture and identity, and a lot of discrete or individual clans and kinship groups. So from the outside, it might look like all Torres Strait Islanders are identical and the same, but there is quite a complex system of clans and families. Their ancestors and their languages and ceremonies provide the link between different clans and group. So the area of land you had and the sea country you had kept you very distinct. Today they still have a trade network that is distinct with these different clans. They have different beliefs, slightly different music, art, creation stories, traditional folklore, and their customs. And they are still a thriving and living culture that is very united in this northern part of Australia. So the Torres Strait Islanders, a very important part, a living part of our community today.
So how can we save the reef? Well, there can be a future for reefs. When I say we need to start acting now, I'm wrong. We needed to start acting years ago. Local problems require local solutions. So if we have dirty water and we take too much fish, that is bad for the reef. So ensure that the area where you are has or petition to have cleaner water systems, maybe water treatment before your wastewater goes into the ocean, or don't allow waste to go into the ocean. Encourage people not to take more fish than is required. In wider society, we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So petition to have people use their cars less. Encourage cleaner forms of generating electricity, cleaner forms of travel. Maybe you can clean up rivers yourself. You can organise groups to go out and pick up rubbish, pick up plastic so that it doesn't go into the oceans. Visit local the coastline of your area, or even here in Australia, and see how you can help whilst you're here in maintaining the water quality. Maybe note and see how water flows from the land into the ocean. What is the quality of water flowing into the oceans? Don't take sharks. Leave sharks in the coral reef. Don't even eat sharks. If you're eating a shark, make sure it is harvested or caught legally and within guidelines that allow for reproduction of sharks. If you're eating a fish from the reef, make sure that is a fish that is not endangered or very important to the reef. You might see reef fish and chips. Well, though, generally speaking, those fish are okay to eat because they are plentiful. There are lots of them. Taking them from the reef is not going to cause damage to the reef. You can be an advocate for climate change. This means speak up for the environment. Write to your local politician or inform your friends. Warn them of the dangers of climate change and tell them that they have to start acting now to find alternative methods of getting our fuel. You can walk more places, ride bicycles. Don't use your car, use public transport. And if you are leaving a room, turn the light off. If you're leaving home, turn off your computer. Don't allow the constant flow of electricity in your home. Or put solar panels on your roof so that you're not using electricity generated from unclean methods. You can eat food locally. If you eat food locally, that food is not then traveling great distances. This is what we call reducing carbon miles. If you like to eat food from other countries, you're encouraging the use of the burning of fossil fuels through petrol. You're encouraging the release of more carbon dioxide into the environment. So eating locally not only helps the environment, it also helps your local community. It helps farmers and producers in your area. As I've already said, have solar panels on the roof. Maybe there is hope for the future. So if we act now to protect the reef, if we act now to protect the environment, we can not only protect ourselves, but also protect the reefs of the planet. Here's one final video for you.
And of course, we should all be taking a part in protecting our planet and conserving both clean air and clean oceans, looking after animals. But it's also the responsibility of some high-profile people to get behind this and push that message. We all know Leonardo DiCaprio, but not a lot of people perhaps know that he has his own foundation, which is the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, the LDF. He first set this up in 1998 with about 500,000 followers, and he now has over 50 million followers worldwide. His aim is to inspire the public to take action on all key environmental issues, and so he uses social media to really get that message across to the average person. He has in particular a high profile on ocean conservation, but he has 6 arms of his LDF. He is passionate about wildland conservation, ocean conservation, climate change, Indigenous rights, transforming California, where he sees a lot of problems with the environment, and also innovative solutions. So very, very active indeed. All of this was recognised when he was actually chosen or designated the United Nations Messenger for Peace for Climate Change. And that just shows how active he was, because there are quite a few other people that were being very, very active in this area as well. He serves on quite a few boards as well, environmental boards, and these include the World Wildlife Fund, the National Geographic's Pristine Oceans Fund, and also Oceans 5. So we're wonderfully active in being concerned about conserving our planet. So Leonardo DiCaprio is quite an amazing and very, very inspiring speaker. And when he talks about the environment, he really makes it clear that we're now in a planetary crisis where we have accelerating climate change, unprecedented loss of biodiversity, increasing health issues caused by a toxic environment. And he's very clear to point out that since 1970, we have lost 1/3 of the world's wildlands. And in that time, 50% of all vertebrate land animals have vanished. 1/3 of our coral reefs, the nurseries of our ocean, have died, and another 1/3 are expected to perish by 2030. So he talks quite passionately about the environment in general, and he takes part in fundraising events like this musical event here to actually then channel money into being proactive and taking steps to stop this planetary crisis. And of course, that's just one of the famous conservational groups. Another one is the Sea Turtle Conservancy. And yes, they are really just looking after sea turtles. This was founded in 1959. So it's the oldest sea turtle group in the world. It was originally set up in Costa Rica, which is the nesting site of a lot of the endangered green sea turtles. And they move that now to looking after sea turtles all over the planet. They also are very famous because they launched an Adopt a Turtle program. And not only is this very, very successful, but it's also very economic. 90% of the donations of people who adopt a turtle, that 90% of that money goes directly to the protection of turtles worldwide. So it's an awesome group, and they're also now advocating for sea turtles in Florida and internationally. So the Sea Turtle Conservancy relies very heavily on volunteers. In the top picture, we can see some of the volunteers who come out just at the time when the baby turtles have hatched from their eggs. They really need a little bit of assistance getting safely into the water. So they put these tiny turtles in buckets and take them very close to the edge of the water so they have a better fighting chance of survival. Other volunteers work more on an ongoing basis, and those are the guys here in their green t-shirts, and they rescue some of the turtles that have suffered perhaps from pollution or from fishing accidents in the water, and they will look after them, get them healthy, and put them back into the ocean. So amazing work that all of these volunteers do. Another famous group is called the Paso Pacifico, and it started off also looking after turtles, and particularly endangered turtle species in Central America. what they discovered was that 95% of all turtle eggs were being poached, were being stolen. And so they started running schools programs, training and paying for rangers to guard the nesting sea turtles, planting lots of trees in sea turtle areas, and then also working with groups in villages where a lot of these sea turtles came from. So they were getting village communities to help in the projects. And they have been incredibly successful in Central America, increasing the number of turtles by these very, very solid steps. Another amazing group that does incredible work is the WDC, the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Group, although they do look after whales, dolphins and porpoises. They are actually the world's leading charity to protect whales and dolphins. One of the main things they're trying to do is to reduce whale and dolphin death due to bycatch. And bycatch is the process by which huge fishing trawlers often have a huge net to pull in a catch from the ocean. They're only after a certain type of fish. They don't want the whales and dolphin. However, they are killed and the carcass thrown back into the water. And so they're putting pressure on fishing trawlers to stop using this method and to stop having these dead whales and dolphins thrown back in and not even used. 300,000 small whales and dolphins die each year in fishing nets alone. So it is quite traumatic. So an amazing group that does amazing work. They're also trying to stop marine animal captivity, and you have marine parks quite often with performing dolphins, and they are actively trying to reduce the number of animals in these types of parks and have them just in the ocean where they belong. Another amazing group is the Ocean Conservancy, and they started initially focusing on whale conservation, and in particular trying to stop whaling. And the two big whaling groups in the world were the Japanese and the Russian. So trying to put pressure on them to reduce their quotas of whales that were caught and to stop whaling for food. Now they work more on coastal cleanups. So if there's any dangerous spill, oil from tankers, just pollution from ships and from obviously here from people as well in coastal areas. Like the Whale and Dolphin Conservation, the WDC, they also work to stop marine animal captivity, trying to get those whales and dolphins back into the ocean where they belong. Now we have a really unique person called Jason Decares, who is also passionately interested in protecting the water, but he does it in, as I said, a very unique way. He has a new art form that he has created, and initially he started creating these statues that he placed underwater to try and raise awareness of the environment, and he blends his environment with art. He has the underwater sculptures, and once they're put under the ocean, he only puts them in areas where there are threatened reefs around the world, coral reefs that are not very healthy. He does a lot of research into the components of these statues that he makes. They've got to be environmentally friendly, so no chemicals that can be released when they mix with the salt water. He puts them in at the right time of year so that coral spores are releasing and they will attach to his statues and grow. And that's what you can see in the first picture here, where coral has become attached to very clean statues and they come almost mouldy looking in effect. But this is the coral starting to grow. And then as the coral grows around these statues under the water, there is a return of marine life. And of course, another thing that he does is that he enables or has a charity set up where people can dive down and have a look at this underwater museum, and that money then goes to protecting any coral reefs further on. So Jason Decares Taylor and his underwater museums are mainly in locations where they have damaged coral reefs, with one exception. He has an underwater display in London, but the most famous ones are in Grenada, Mexico, the Bahamas, Spain. And in 2017, last year, he actually started plans to set up an underwater museum in the Great Barrier Reef off Townsville. So as I said, he has these most amazing carvings that he spends practically a year doing and then starts to put them underwater. They are predominantly of people, and quite often large groups of people doing quite normal things in life. This one is only recently been put underwater and doesn't yet have any coral growing on it. These ones are kind of faceless people taking a selfie and boat people in the background. These ones are groups of people, and interestingly, not really looking at each other or communicating. He has them looking down at the bottom of the ocean floor or looking up, and now obviously looking up to fish that are floating by. These carvings have been under the water about 10 years, and as I said, you can see now that the coral spores are starting to attach and grow over the carvings. So the carvings change. It's a changing museum. And once the coral spores are there, the fish start returning, and a reef of a museum type starts to grow. A circle of friends. This is a person who has dived down to have a look at some of the carvings that he has in one of the reef areas in the Bahamas. And this lovely individual person working at their desk, just the beginning of a new reef starting. So an amazing artist with a slightly different approach to protecting the coral reefs. We're going to step away from the lecture for a few minutes and listen to Morgan Freeman talking about the health of our planet Earth. And he does have a passion for the oceans, but he's also really quite concerned about the health of the planet in general. Remember to return back to this lecture after you've listened and watched Morgan Freeman. Thank you for listening this week, and we hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the planet's health in general, but in particular the desperate plight of our coral reefs worldwide. Remember, you have 2 tasks to do. You have a reading task, and then of course complete the lecture task. We look forward to being with you again next week.